next Prime Minister of this country, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you very much for what you just said, and thank you for everything that you do as our Shadow Health Secretary and all that you've done for many years, campaigning for the rights of black people not to be discriminated against, to have the same and decent chance in society. And as the first ever black woman elected to Parliament, your place in history is absolutely secured because of that victory and all you've done ever since then. And it's very kind the way Diane asked me to come along and say some words just now. But please look at it this way. There's a whole team of us. There's a team of all of us that want to see and do things differently within our society. It's all about strength of numbers and strength of doing things collectively. And when Diane spoke just now about the mental health crisis in Britain, she has stood alongside the junior doctors, called out the PFI initiative for what it is, a way in which our NHS is ripped off by a lot of people making a great deal of money from it. That money should be spent on patient care, not sent to tax havens. Her remarks about mental health are absolutely crucial, because there is a mental health crisis in Britain. 1 in 4 of us will go through a crisis during our lives, and tragically too many people, sadly too many young men, feel so isolated, so bound down by a macho culture and a stigma they can't say or do anything about it. It's up to us, all of us, to reach out to everyone else to help them get through any crisis they're in the midst of. I also want to say thank you to everyone that's here today and all the great banners that there are here today, and I'm really taken by the one, nationalise Bake Off. I think the fate of Bake Off is what happens when the BBC was allowed to contract out its programme making somewhere else, and thus the public lost ownership of Bake Off. Shall we get it back? Are we all going to bake? That was a bit low, hardly any of you are bakers, obviously. Can I also say a huge thank you to Rachel Harris and everyone else in this incredible team in Birmingham in the West Midlands that have put together this rally at 2 days' notice, in addition to a rally this morning in Nuneaton, and all the phone banking and all the campaigning and all the other events we've had. Thank you very much to every one of them, because ours is a campaign of volunteers. The average donation to our campaign is less than £20. The numbers of volunteers runs into the tens of thousands all over the country. They do it because they see things done differently. They do it because they want a politics of hope, a politics of opportunity, a politics that does offer a real alternative to what this government is doing. And so, on a personal level, of course, I say thank you very much to all of them. On a personal level, I say a huge thank you to those colleagues in the Shadow Cabinet. Diane, who've mentioned, John McDonnell, Becky Long-Bailey, Richard Bergen, Kate Osamore, Clive Lewis, and so many others who've stood by to make sure that the election result last year is carried through, and the determination of us to have a party opposed to the economics of austerity remains the central core of what we're doing and what we're saying. Thank you to all of them for all that they do. This is the
54th event as part of this leadership campaign that I've been to all over the country. Most of them are now open-air rallies for two reasons. Mainly that anybody can get to an open-air rally, and many come along who maybe wouldn't go to an indoor event, wouldn't necessarily be committed to the politics that many of us enjoy here, but would want to hear what we have to say. And that surely is what's important about a politics that reaches out. And of course, by having open-air rallies, the weather is always good. There's been no problems there except when it's rained, and it creates that fantastic atmosphere. Social media is very important. Social media is a great way of communicating. The mainstream media is also a very good way of communicating when we get the space to do so. But an open-air event, a community event, does bring about something rather different, that feeling of that buzz. And I spoke so many times in Birmingham on anti-war rallies and many other things, and I know the way this city comes together for a radical cause, and comes together to support people who are up against it. And so there are many things I could say, but I've been asked to not speak for too long today because all right, okay. It's because I've got other spaces to speak out later on. Is that okay? I just some points I want to make. Ever since the Brexit vote, there's been the most disgraceful and disgusting rise in racism, hate crime all across the country. I quite simply say this: when communities come together to demand decent schools, to demand a properly funded health service, to demand open spaces, to demand housing for those that need it, we are stronger, every one of us. We are that more confident and that more determined of what we can do together. But when a community is driven apart by a party that I don't really want to mention their name, but they've managed to put up a huge poster during the EU referendum that described a bunch of desperate people who could well be the teachers, engineers and doctors of the future, described them as an enemy at the gate. When you divide communities in the way they are, you create and scapegoat the nearest and newest arrived group of migrants, you scapegoat migrant workers, you scapegoat victims of oppression in so many ways. And at the end of it, you've not built one school, trained one hospital doctor, built one house or anything else. All you've done is created hate and disunity in society, and the rich and powerful benefit as a result of that. And so it's up to us, not just in the political statements we make, but also in our daily lives and our activities as a huge movement, to bring all communities together. We will not tolerate anti-Semitism in any form. We will not tolerate Islamophobia in any form. We will not tolerate racism in any form within our society. We make that abundantly clear to everyone. Our purpose is about bringing people together to create that better and more decent society for all of us. A year ago, we challenged for the leadership of the Labour Party because we were disappointed at the general election result, and because we were frustrated that in that general election campaign of 2015, we had good policies, yes, but fundamentally we were still offering a process of reducing the role of the public sector in people's lives. In other words, we were still proposing cuts in public expenditure at the expense of the poorest and most vulnerable within our society. The banking crisis of 2008-9 was not caused by payments to the homeless, not caused by the wages of care workers, not caused by children in school. It was caused by deregulation and by the inability of the political classes to face up to it. And so we challenged on that. And after the election, John McDonnell became the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he called it out for what it is: austerity, a political choice, not an economic necessity. And instead of a process of explaining away the way in which central government will continue reducing its role, instead he's developed a very strong economic strategy which is about investment. 500 billion across the whole country on infrastructure investment, industrial investment, housing investment, schools and health investment. It can be done and it must be done. It must be done fairly across the whole country. 48 billion of that would come to the West Midlands to help with the very necessary economic regeneration, so that those skills that are locked up and not used because of deindustrialisation can be unleashed and unlocked in a new and developing sustainable form of industry all across the West Midlands. Give young people the chance. And so the fundamental issue has to be about the economy and justice. But with that also goes some very necessary changes. You will have all heard and read, I'm sure, about Sport Direct. Its warehouse in Shirebrook, condemned by an all-party parliamentary select committee, condemned by many. And I pay tribute and thank you to all the unions, particularly Unite the Union, that called it out for what it was and showed that where you have an organised workplace, you would not have a woman so frightened that at the very point when she's about to give birth to a child is so afraid of losing her job, she cannot even take the day off or go home and tries to give birth in a toilet. What kind of world are we living in, where people are so afraid at their place of work of losing their job, they cannot seek medical help when they desperately need it? Mike Ashley might now be paying back £1 million in unpaid wages to those people, but it's got to go a lot further. The agency worker system, by which big companies can avoid their responsibilities, the way in which migrant workers can be grotesquely exploited by spurious living arrangements which deduct from their wages and then end up with arguments and anger between different groups. The only way forward is workers coming together through the strength of a trade union, through the right of recognition, the right of organisation, to defend the gains we've made. The minimum wage, the living wage, maternity leave, paternity leave, end to discrimination, all those issues. And so during this year I've launched Workplace 2020. Workplace 2020 to take evidence from unions, from individuals, from companies and from the self-employed about the workers' rights that we want in the future. And I say to any employer who says, well, union recognition is all very well, I simply say this: if there's a level playing field on training, on apprenticeships, on living wage, on representation, on recognition, you won't get undercutting of each other's wages. You won't get destruction of each other's conditions of work. It's unity that works to bring about a better standard of living for all. That surely is what the watchword of the Labour movement is about. This country faces many crises, one of which, the greatest possibly, is the housing crisis in Britain today. That housing crisis means that millions of people live in private rented accommodation. Millions don't know if they're going to be in that flat in 6 months' time, because an assured short-hold tenancy only gives them 6 months. Many don't know what their future is. What does that do to a child growing up not knowing if they're going to see their mates in school because they might be moving school, might be moving town, might be moving all around the country? Those living in council accommodation because there's too little of it, unable to get a decent place big enough for their families. Teenage children, 3 or 4 sharing a room, can't do their homework, unsurprising they don't achieve so well in school. We are shortchanging a whole generation of children by our failure to invest in decent, good quality, lifetime tenancies in good quality council housing across this country. And so one of our proposals is that in the first term of a Labour government we'll build 500,000 council homes to give decent chances to everybody. And before anybody condemns me as saying, well, that's incredibly expensive, yeah, it is expensive. But I tell you something that is also very expensive, that is using tax credits to pay £9.5 billion every year to private landlords in housing benefit to subsidise very high rents. Things have to be done differently within our society. So much better that we invest that money in bricks, in mortar. We invest that money in good quality jobs in the construction industry and all the way down that supply chain. So we look for housing for those that need it, and not housing, luxury housing for the privileged few, and luxury housing in the southeast that's often left empty as a land bank to make money out of in the future. That surely has to be a better way forward. Next, in 2 weeks' time, this square would be probably quite difficult for us to get admission to, because that building over there is going to host, if that's the right word, the Conservative Party conference. I thought you were going to give that reaction, actually. I'm sure you're going to welcome them to Birmingham. I'm sure you'll be here to welcome them. And they're going to be, no doubt, debating their ideas on education. Well, there's lots one could say about education. Fundamentally, education should be a right, not a privilege, both before we start school and after we leave college. So we want a policy that gives good quality, decent childcare to all preschool children, so they can learn to socialise, play together and develop together. Those little friendships last a very long time and pay off in community cohesion. Likewise, the family of education through a local education authority means that schools can work together to support each other rather than seeing the school down the road as a competitor or a rival. So when they try to academise every secondary school and every primary school, the teaching unions, many others, and the Labour Party stood up against them. And you know what? In a very short time, the Tory party collapsed on that one and backed off and didn't impose it. And now they've come up with the genius of an idea that the great way forward is to bring back the 11 plus and divide our children at the age of 11. I simply say this: if you bring back the 11 plus, bring back the idea that at the age of 11 all children will be tested, many parents hope and believe their child would succeed in passing the 11 plus and go to a grammar school. Sadly, the majority of children, however able they are, would not pass it and would not go to a grammar school. They would go to something else. They used to be called secondary modern schools. I don't know what the new Tory party name would be. Possibly modern secondaries or something like that. Something really original. But that decision at the age of 11 to test those children, that success or non-success in the 11 plus exam has lifetime consequences for every single one of those children. Isn't it better that we recognise and value all of our children? Don't test at 11. Don't segregate at 11. Treat all children as able, valuable, unique individuals who must be given the very best that we can offer, that they may develop in later life. And so we will oppose the bringing back of the 11 plus. Many in the country also oppose it. Indeed, many Tories oppose it. And this week I was able to congratulate Theresa May on bringing unity across the Tory party in opposition to it, as well as unity across the whole country. So stand up, no segregation at 11, education for all children. Diane has spoken of health and spoken about determination. This election is about the kind of society we want to live in. It's also about the kind of politics we want within our society. A year ago, or just over a year ago, the Labour Party had 200,000 members. The membership is now 540,000. 300,000 people have joined the Labour Party in 1 year. And they've joined because they want to see things done differently. They've joined because they want to take part in politics and want the opportunity to put forward their ideas and their policies. So in this leadership campaign, we put out 10 points that are significant in terms of health, of housing, of education, of environment, of international peace and justice, of human rights, and about the way we run our economy. We've put those out there for consultation. We put those out there because we want responses. And the day after we'd launched the culture programme at the Edinburgh Festival, the idea that there's a genius in all of us and every child must have access to music doesn't seem that revolutionary to me, but apparently is very revolutionary to some people that believe in elitism in everything. We don't. We believe in the genius of all of us. But it's also about how we conduct our politics. And so after this election campaign is over, I want our party to come together. I want our party to recognise the mandate that the election gave last year, and whatever the result is will give us this year. And I say to all my colleagues in Parliament, some of whom have not supported the views that we put forward, don't necessarily agree with some of the statements we make, recognise a couple of things. One, that anti-austerity is now on the lips of everybody except the Chancellor of the Exchequer. We have changed politics in this country. Recognise that the neoliberal economic model of the 1970s is well past its sell-by date, as is known all over the world, and we're offering something different. And so I ask them, come together to fight the Tories, come together to fight austerity, come together to build housing, come together to defeat the 11 plus, come together so that the growing and deepening inequality in Britain, which is what the Tory party is all about, can be challenged. By coming together, 3 million families didn't lose £1,000 this year because we defeated them on tax credit cuts. £4 billion has not been taken from those with disabilities through cancelling of personal independence payments. And yes, we haven't defeated them on everything else, that I'm fully aware of. But surely, if we come together in that sense of unity we must have to oppose them, oppose the principles on which they operate, then we are doing a good service not just for this generation but for all the generations to come. That we can say to our children, you are not going to be worse off than we are. I don't want our children to leave university with massive debts any more than I want them to be exploited on underpaid apprenticeships where they're grotesquely exploited by unreasonable employers. And we need, as Diane pointed out, that health service as a human right free at the point of use. And we need a government that dedicates itself around the world to peace, democracy, justice and human rights, which is why earlier today I sent a message of welcome and support to the refugees rally in London today to show that we also have the hand of humanity. And so our campaign has brought so many people together. And when we campaign all the time in our communities against the injustices, the exploitation and the racism that's put to others, we bring people together. we then point the way to something very good and very different in society. And I finish on this point. Last night I was speaking at a memorial event for Keir Hardie, the founder of the Labour Party, a child labourer, a child miner, sent down the pit at the age of 8 in Lanarkshire. He was blacklisted as a trade union activist in his teenage years. He never really had a childhood. And because he was blacklisted, the rest of the miners employed him as their organiser and their official. And he went on to become the first ever Labour MP, the founder of our party, and a man with the most amazing international vision, as well as about a vision of social justice. The event last night wasn't just in looking back in honour at a man who also stood up for the rights of women to get the vote and stood up against racism in society then just as much as he would now were he still here. But it's also taking the principles that he put forward, taking the principles of those that fought for trade unionism in this city, those that fought for decent housing in this city, into the 21st century. Is it to be a century of war, injustice, inequality, environmental degradation, and growing rift between the richest and the poorest? Or is it to be the century when the human endeavour, the human spirit, the human ambition of everybody is unleashed for the good of everybody? Our principles are about bringing people together. Our party is designed to bring people together. That's why I look forward to an election result next week. But above all, I look forward to the campaigning after that, and the big election when the Tories meeting in there won't be the party of government, it will be a democratic revolution that brings about a democratic change in our society. Thank you very much. And that's UB40 for you. Thank you.